What if I told you that one meeting, lasting less than 2 hours, destroyed one of the most powerful companies on earth? Not because they made a bad product, not because they ran out of money, not because their competitors were smarter, but because they made 5 decisions that looked completely reasonable at the time. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what those 5 decisions were, why millions of customers saw them coming, why Blockbuster ignored every warning, and why the company that begged them for help ended up replacing them. Because in the year 2000, two entrepreneurs walked into Blockbuster headquarters asking for a lifeline. Their company was running out of money, so investors were disappearing. Bankruptcy was becoming a real possibility. So they made an offer. Buy our entire company for $50 million. According to multiple published accounts, the proposal was met with laughter. The founders left the building. No deal. 10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. The tiny company they rejected was worth billions. Today, that company is Netflix. But this isn't really a story about Netflix. It's a story about something far more dangerous. How success can quietly become the beginning of failure. Because the companies that collapse rarely die overnight. They die one decision at a time. And Blockbuster made 5 of them. The first one was so profitable that nobody inside the company wanted to give it up. It would become the decision that changed entertainment forever. To understand how Blockbuster disappeared, you first have to understand what it felt like to be Blockbuster. Imagine it's Friday night. The year is 2001. A family pulls into a brightly lit parking lot. Children race toward the entrance. Parents argue over what movie to rent. Teenagers head straight for the new releases. Every shelf is packed. Every aisle is full. Every checkout line is busy. This wasn't just a video store till it was Friday night. For millions of people, Blockbuster wasn't part of their weekend. It was the weekend. At its peak, Blockbuster operated more than 9,000 stores across 25 countries, 60,000 employees, 65 million registered members, nearly $6 billion in annual revenue. On an average Friday night, roughly 1 out of every 5 American households walked through the doors of a Blockbuster store. Think about that for a second. Imagine building a business so dominant that millions of families organize their weekends around it. From the outside, it looked invincible. Competitors came and went. Hollywood depended on them, studios depended on them, customers depended on them. If you had asked almost any business expert in the year 2000 which company would still exist 20 years later, Blockbuster, or a tiny DVD by mail startup called Netflix, the answer would have seemed obvious. Everyone believed Blockbuster had already won. Everyone except Netflix. And here's the strange part. Blockbuster wasn't destroyed by a brilliant surprise. The warning signs were everywhere. Customers complained, executives raised concerns, the market was changing. The company saw every signal. They simply believed they had more time. They didn't. The first decision looked like the easiest one in the world. It also made them hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. Decision number 1. Late fees. It sounds almost ridiculous. How could a late fee destroy a multi-billion-dollar empire? Because it wasn't just a late fee, it was $800 million. Every year, customers forgot to return movies. Every day, they paid penalties. And every quarter, those penalties made Wall Street happy. In the year 2000, late fees generated around $800 million. Roughly 16% of Blockbuster's total revenue. Imagine walking into the boardroom and suggesting that the company should voluntarily give up hundreds of millions of dollars. No investor would applaud. No shareholder would celebrate. Most executives would have called you insane. But there was one problem. Customers hated them. Not disliked, hated. Every late fee made another customer promise, I'll never come back. Blockbuster could measure revenue, but they couldn't measure resentment. Then, a small startup discovered something extraordinary. What if the thing customers hated the most became your biggest selling point? Netflix didn't advertise better stores. They didn't advertise more movies. They advertised 3 simple words: no late fees. Suddenly, the thing that made Blockbuster rich became the reason people tried Netflix. Reed Hastings has often told the story of returning a copy of Apollo 13 weeks late and being charged $40. Standing there, holding a single movie, he wasn't thinking about starting a billion-dollar company. He was asking himself why renting a movie felt like being punished. Great companies don't always invent something new. Sometimes they simply remove what everyone already hates. Inside Blockbuster, executives knew exactly how unpopular late fees were. Customer surveys showed it, complaint records showed it, employees heard about it every single day. They had the evidence. They had the opportunity. What they didn't have was the courage to sacrifice today's profits for tomorrow's survival. Because here's the cruel truth: success creates habits. Habits create comfort. And comfort is where innovation goes to die. But late fees weren't the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake walked through Blockbuster's front door a few months later. His name was Reed Hastings. Decision number 2. The meeting. Imagine the room. Glass walls, leather chairs, executives in tailored suits, a company at the absolute peak of its power. Now imagine the people walking through the door. Not billionaires, not celebrities, not industry legends. Just 2 entrepreneurs trying to save a company that was running out of time. Reed Hastings, Mark Randolph. Netflix had around 300,000 subscribers. Blockbuster had 65 million customers. The difference was so enormous, it barely seemed like a competition. Hastings made a simple proposal: buy Netflix, the entire company, for $50 million. Today, that number feels absurdly small. Back then, it felt absurdly large. Why would the biggest video rental company on earth buy a tiny business that mailed DVDs through the post? According to published accounts of the meeting, some executives struggled to hide their amusement. To them, Netflix wasn't the future. It was a niche service for people who lived too far away from a Blockbuster store. Think about that. The very thing Blockbuster believed made Netflix weak was exactly what made it scalable. Because Netflix didn't need thousands of expensive buildings, thousands of parking lots, thousands of utility bills, thousands of employees waiting behind cash registers. Every new customer cost Netflix almost nothing. Every new customer cost Blockbuster another physical store. But nobody in that room was thinking 10 years ahead. They were thinking about this quarter, this year's profits, this month's numbers. And when you're standing on top of the mountain, it's almost impossible to imagine that someone climbing below you could ever reach the summit. The meeting ended. No partnership. No acquisition. No second chance. As Reed Hastings walked out of Blockbuster headquarters, he wasn't leaving with $50 million. He was leaving with complete freedom to destroy the company that had just rejected him. But here's the twist almost nobody knows. Rejecting Netflix wasn't the decision that killed Blockbuster, because 4 years later, they actually found a way to beat Netflix. And then they destroyed it themselves. For a moment, it looked like Blockbuster had survived. By 2004, Netflix was growing fast. Customers were abandoning late fees. DVDs were arriving by mail. Wall Street was beginning to notice. For the first time, Blockbuster realized Netflix wasn't a curiosity anymore. It was a threat. And this time, they responded. Aggressively. They launched a new service, Blockbuster Online. Unlimited rentals, movies by mail, no late fees. Everything customers loved about Netflix, offered by a company with thousands of stores, millions of loyal members, and one of the most recognizable brands in America. Then they did something Netflix couldn't. Customers could return a movie to any Blockbuster store and immediately rent another one. No waiting. No shipping delays. No empty mailbox. For the first time, Netflix was on defense. Industry analysts praised the strategy. Subscribers joined by the millions. Even Netflix executives admitted this was the strongest challenge their company had ever faced. And then, Blockbuster made another decision. Not because the strategy was failing, because it was succeeding. The online business was growing rapidly. But every customer who rented online was one less customer walking into a Blockbuster store. The company had built the perfect weapon against Netflix, but that weapon was also hurting their own stores. This is one of the hardest lessons in business. Sometimes your greatest innovation doesn't destroy your competitor. It destroys your old business model. Blockbuster had a choice: protect the future or protect the past. They chose the past. Investment slowed, support weakened, internal priorities shifted back to the retail stores. They weren't competing against Netflix anymore. They were competing against themselves. And history has shown that almost every great company loses the same way. Not because another company builds something better, but because they refuse to replace what made them successful. Blockbuster still had time, still had customers, still had money, still had one final opportunity. But then, the world itself changed. Not because of DVDs, not because of stores, because of something almost nobody believed would ever replace them. Streaming. Decision 4, they bet against the future for years. Blockbuster believed people would always want to visit a store, walk the aisles, hold a movie in their hands, drive home, press play. Oh no, now. Netflix believed something completely different. One day, movies wouldn't travel to people. People would stream them instantly. In 2007, Netflix launched streaming. The library was small, the quality wasn't great, most people ignored it. Blockbuster did too. But Netflix wasn't building for the internet people had. They were building for the internet people would have. Every year, connections became faster. More homes got broadband. Smart TVs appeared. Streaming improved. Blockbuster didn't. Their greatest strength, thousands of physical stores, had quietly become their biggest liability. The future had arrived. And Blockbuster was still protecting the past. On September 23rd, 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. More than 9,000 stores slowly disappeared, one after another. Today, only one remains. In Bend, Oregon. Not as a center of an empire, but as a museum of a world that no longer exists. Netflix, the company Blockbuster could have bought for just $50 million, is now worth hundreds of billions. But this story isn't really about Blockbuster. It's about every successful company that mistakes today's dominance for tomorrow's guarantee. Kodak, Nokia, Yahoo, BlackBerry, Sears. Different industries, the same mistake. The future almost never arrives looking unstoppable. It arrives looking smaller, slower, inferior, almost laughable. Until one day, it isn't. Somewhere tonight, another tiny startup is being dismissed inside the boardroom of another giant. History suggests only one of them will still be here 20 years from now. And if Blockbuster teaches us anything, it's this. The companies that disappear aren't always the ones that stop innovating. Sometimes they're the ones that stop believing they have anything left to learn.